Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon,
So
sir.
now it is lecture number 5 of Introduction to Physical Metallurgy class, and here the topic are potential energy versus interatomic distance and atomic structure and bonding. Okay. So this is interatomic force versus interatomic distance for two isolated atoms. Suppose here in the y-axis you can see this is the force axis, and this axis is showing you interatomic separation distance. Right? So now suppose we have two isolated atoms like this. We have two isolated atoms. Suppose this is one atom and this is another atom. Suppose consider these two atoms are far away from one another initially. They are isolated from one another. So the moment you start bringing these two atoms closer, or suppose these two atoms are approaching one another, what happens? There is a force of attraction and force of repulsion will be start acting on the material, acting on these two atoms basically here now. That means forces will be acting. One force is attractive and the force is repulsive. But what happens? Initially, two atoms are far away from one another, right? But the moment they are approaching one another, attractive force will start acting on it. You can see here. This is going, the attractive force is increasing because the distance is decreasing between the two atoms in this direction, right? So initially there will be attractive force acting, strong attractive force will be dominating. So that's why the curve is moving like this. After distance, what happens? A negative force, this is the actual graph of the negative force, that is, actually this is repulsive force. This repulsive force will start acting. This curve showing the repulsive force. But this curve is showing you the net force acting on the two atoms. So basically what happens when initially two atoms are far away from one another, there is no force actually acting on the two atoms. But the moment two atoms are approaching one another, force will be acting on the two atoms by one another, right? And two types of force, attractive and repulsive force. Initially what happens? There will be attractive force. That's why this curve is like this. But after some times there will be a repulsive force will be acting, right? I'll explain further in the next curve. And you can see this is a distance R0. I will talk about R0 in the next slide. This is a scenario actually. You can see initially two atoms are far away from one another. So there will be no force actually acting on the atoms. But the moment they are coming closer, they will come to a particular distance. That is called atoms are at equilibrium distance. The net force acting over here will be actually 0. That means attractive force will be equal to repulsive force here. But finally, when two atoms are so close to one another, the electron cells will overlap one another. At this moment, there will be a strong repulsive force will be acting. So in this condition, there will be no force initially, but when they come closer, attractive force will be there, and finally they will reach a particular distance that is called equilibrium distance, where the net force acting on the system will be 0, right? But the moment they are very close to one another, this is the condition when electron cells overlaps, then what happens? There will be a strong repulsive force will be there. I'll further explain in this slide. This is a very important slide. You can see potential energy in the y-axis and interatomic distance, or you can say internuclear distance plot. In y-axis we have potential energy. In x-axis we have interatomic distance or interatomic separation. Right. So this is one atom and this another atom. Suppose initially two atoms are very far away from one another, right? So there will be no force acting on the two atoms. But the moment they will approach one another, they will become closer to one another. You can see what I have told. I have told that the strong attractive force will be acting on the two atoms. The dominant force will be attractive force. How the attractive force will come into existence? Because you understand atoms have nucleus, right? positively charged because it has neutron and proton. Neutron is neutral, proton is positively charged, so nucleus is, you can say, it is positively charged. And surrounding, they have cells, orbitals, which contains electrons. Electrons are negatively charged. So this nucleus will attract the electrons, this nucleus will attract the electrons, so there will be a dominating force, will be attractive force. But what happened to the potential energy? You can see the moment they are coming closer to one another, the potential energy will decrease. You can see the curve is going down because the potential energy is decreasing, right? So they are moving towards a equilibrium condition, or you can say they are moving towards stability. Stability is inversely proportional to potential energy, right? The potential energy is decreasing, so they will acquire a stability condition, a stable configuration, right? So you can see there now these two atoms are close. So what happens? The potential energy is further decreasing, and finally they will reach to a particular gap where the potential energy will be minimum. So this is so this distance will be the equilibrium distance, right? Why? Because they have minimum potential energy between them, right? The potential energy of the system will be minimum, right? But the moment you bring these two atoms more closer, after this equilibrium distance, if the distance will be reduced further, what happens? Again, the potential energy will be increased. Why? Because there will be a strong repulsive force will be start acting. Now, after this point, if the distance between the atoms will be closer or become reduced, then the potential energy will increase again. Why? Because repulsive force will be more dominating now. That's why the potential energy is moving up in this figure. This is the repulsive direction. This is the attractive force direction. Fine. Fn is the net force, which is attractive force plus repulsive force. So net force is a function of interatomic distance, as I told. And R0 is the equilibrium distance. This is the R0 distance actually, which is when Fn is equal to 0. So net force is equal to 0 at equilibrium distance R0. And R0, equilibrium distance between the two atoms, is basically 0.3 nanometer for many atoms. It may not be always 0.3, it may be less or more, but basically it is 0.3 nanometer. Right? I think this part is clear.
Yes, sir.
And this gap is bond energy, and this length is bond length, right? And you understand why we have discussed this part, because the physical properties basically, and basically some properties like melting point, boiling point, right? The stiffness, the bulk modulus, basically they depends upon this bonding, this bond length or bond energy basically, right? So higher is the bond energy or higher is the bond strength, the material have high melting point, high boiling point, right? Similarly, if the material have high melting point, high boiling point, they also have high stiffness. Basically, stiffness or this bulk, this Young's modulus of a material depend upon the stiffness of the curve actually. Stiffness of this curve. Higher is the stiffness. Higher is the stiffness. Higher is the this material will be more stiffer. You can say. Or material will be flexible if the slope of this curve will be less. If the slope of the curve will be more stiffer, the material will be more stiffer. Or you can say they have high Young's modulus. Fine. Okay, next we'll move to the atomic structure and bonding in the solid material. Atomic structure I will not discuss much because already you have gone through that in school days with a great knowledge. Like we have atoms, and atoms contains nucleus, and we have surrounding electrons moving around the nucleus in a particular region, right? Cells and orbitals. And the nucleus is positively charged because it contains neutron and proton. Proton is positively charged. Nucleus is the main, which is present in the center of the atom, which is denser and smaller in size. And electrons are negatively charged. right? And okay, fine. But I'll discuss some important concept, that is concept of valence electron. So valence electron is very important because valence electrons are the electrons which occupies the outermost cell, valence cell or outermost cell, you can say, right? What is the significance of valence electron? The significance of valence electron is that they take part in the bond formation. So during the bond formation, this valence electron will play a role because they take part in the bonding. Fine. And the physical property and chemical property of the solids also depends upon this valence electron, right? Then stable electronic configuration concept. You people have already have a good idea on this. That because in a periodic table we have lot of elements, right? Metals, non-metals, inert gases, right? Semiconductors. So what this 2 or 8 number of electrons in outermost cell leads to stable electronic configuration, basically. So if atoms have 2 electron in its valence cell or 8 electron in its valence cell, then that is called stable electronic configuration. They are inert, basically. They do not react, right? Or if a electron wants that also, if a atom wants that, it wants 2 electron in its outermost cell, or it wants 8 electron in outermost cell, they can do that also, and they can acquire stability. So that is the concept of stability. Why there is a reaction between two atoms? That is the reason, because they want to attain stability. They want to attain a stable electronic configuration, right? Like inert gases. Inert gases, you understand, they have either 2 electrons or 8 number of electrons in their outermost cell. Now, the cause of atomic bonding and few chemical reaction. Already I have told you that many electrons do not have 2 to 8 number of valence electrons, so that they are not stable. So to acquire stability, the atoms in them either share electrons between them, or they gain or lose electrons to form charged ions. Fine. Now, bonding in solids. So we can have 2 types of bonding, the primary bonding and secondary bonding in solids. Basically, primary bonding are basically chemical bonds. Chemical bonds are basically always strong, you have to remember. Physical bonds are weaker. So primary bonds are chemical bonds. They are very strong bonds, right? They are basically 3 types: ionic, covalent, and metallic bond. Fine. And all these bonds involve valence electron. And cause of formation of this bond is to gain stable electronic configuration structure, as I have already told you. Like in case of inert gases. Inert gases are also called noble gases because they do not react with any other things, right? And secondary bonds are weaker than primary bonds. They are physical in nature, as I have told. And the bond energy, if you consider the bond strength, if you consider, it is very less, 10 kilojoule per mole, or 0.1 electron volt per atom. But here, in case of primary bond, it is very high. I'll show you soon, like 600 or more than that. I'll show you the figure. Now we'll discuss ionic bond. What is an ionic bond? Ionic bond, see, as I have told, we have 3 kinds of chemical bond or primary bond: ionic, covalent, and metallic. These kind of bonds formation will be takes place in between metals, or metals, non-metals, or non-metals, right? So basically, ionic bond will be formed between metal atom and a non-metal atom, right? If you bring a metal atom and a non-metal atom together, they may form a ionic bond, basically. So mechanism of formation of ionic bond. What is the mechanism? The mechanism is, you understand, so both metal and non-metal atoms get electrically charged and become positive and negative ions, because to acquire stable electronic configuration. So metal atom lose its valence electron and non-metal atoms gain its, right? So basically, you understand, that means if you consider a periodic table, in the left extreme we have these alkali metals and alkaline earth metals. They have more number of electrons in their valence cell. And in case of the extreme right part, we have less number of electrons to acquire the stable electronic configuration. So what happened? If you bring these two atoms, one from extreme left of the periodic table and extreme right of the periodic table, so metallic atoms will lose electron to attain the stable electronic configuration, but the non-metallic atoms will gain it. So during this process, what will happen? The metallic atoms become positively charged and non-metallic atoms will become negatively charged, right? So once they will acquire charge, the metallic atom become positively charged and non-metallic atom acquires negatively charged. So there will be a strong attractive forces will be acting, right? Strong Coulombic force will be there. So that will bond them together, right? Best example is sodium chloride. Sodium is a metallic atom, chlorine is a non-metallic atom. Sodium acquires positively charged, chlorine will acquire negatively charged. So they will form sodium chloride finally. This is a compound. Similarly, magnesium oxide. Magnesium is a metallic atom which will acquire positively charged, oxygen acquires negatively charged. So finally, they will form a compound, MgO. So we can have a lot of examples. And nature of, if you consider the nature of ionic bonding, so they are basically non-directional in nature, right? Why non-directional? Obviously, you can understand surrounding a positive ion or a negative ion, the magnitude of the charge is equal everywhere, right? And you understand in a ionic compound, the positively charged atom will be surrounded by negatively charged atoms, and negatively charged atoms will be surrounded by positively charged atoms. So everywhere there is bonding. The bonding is not directional in nature; it is non-directional. Fine. And the thing is, ceramics have this kind of bonding. If you look into the ceramics, we have three kinds of material: metals, polymers, and ceramics. Ceramics basically have this kind of bonding, right? Then bond energy or bond strength. As I have told, this ionic bond have very high bond energy or bond strength, 600 to 1500 kilojoule per mole. You can understand 3 to 8 electron volt per atom. You can understand there is a range actually. So we can have different kinds of material, ionic materials, and different ionic materials have different kind of bond strength. So which may have 600, which may have 700, 800, up to 1500. Fine. So due to this high bond strength or high bond energy, the melting point of this material having this kind of bond is very high. Fine. So that's why the ceramics materials have very high melting point. Fine. The carbides, the nitrides, the borides, silicates, those have very high melting point because of this strong bond or bond strength, right? Because the bond energy or bond strength is nothing but the amount of energy required to break the bond, right? So if you want to make the solid into liquid, you have to break the bond, right? So more energy will be required. So that's why they have high melting point. And the characteristics of this material having this kind of bond is what? As I have told, high melting point, may have high boiling point, and high hardness, they are brittle, but electrically and thermally insulative. Why they are electrically and thermally insulative? We'll discuss that later. Now, covalent bonding. Covalent bond basically forms between two non-metallic atoms, right? In ionic bonding, we have one metallic atom, one non-metallic atom, but in case of covalent bonding, the bond will form between two non-metallic atoms, basically. Fine. I'll give you an example here. So mechanism of formation of this covalent bond. So bond formed due to sharing of electrons. Here the electron will be getting shared. But in case of ionic bond, the metallic atoms give electrons to the non-metallic atoms and non-metallic atoms will gain electrons. Losing and gaining is happening to acquire stable electronic configuration. But here, to attain stable electronic configuration, they need to share the electrons. The electron will getting shared between the metallic atom and non-metallic atom, right? So here I have written each atom contributes at least one electron to bond, and this electron belongs to both, right? So best example is methane, CH4. In case of methane, one carbon atom is there and 4 hydrogen atoms is there, right? So you can understand in one carbon atoms, we have 4 valence electrons, right? So to acquire electronic to acquire this stable electronic configuration, it needs 4 electrons. So somebody has to share 4 electrons with carbon. So this 4 hydrogen atom will share each electrons to the carbon atoms. Similarly, in case of each hydrogen atoms, we have 1 valence electron and the electrons to get stable electronic configuration. So each carbon, so these carbon atoms will supply or contribute or give or share, you can say share, not give, share each outermost cell electrons with each hydrogen atom, right? So now, due to this kind of sharing, they will attain stable electronic configuration. So it will form methane, right? Similarly, this kind of covalent bond are exist in water, H2O, HNO3, hydrofluoric acid, some molecules like hydrogen, H2, Cl2, F2, right? Then some examples like diamond have this kind of bonding, silicon, germanium, gallium arsenide, indium antimonide, silicon carbides. If you consider this diamond, this silicon carbide, they are very strong. Diamond and silicon carbide is very hard. They are very strong because of this covalent bonding. So covalent bonding is also very strong, right? But not always. That I will show you some example here. Now, nature of covalent bonding, the covalent bonding is directional in nature. You have to remember. Why directional? Because they are concerned, they are focused to particular atoms, because they forms due to sharing of this electron, right? So bond will be remain in between the two atoms. So they are completely directional. They are not like ionic bonding. I have written present in the direction between one atoms and another that participate in the electron sharing, right? And what are the characteristics? The characteristics is the material having this covalent bonding, like diamond, they are very hard and they are very high melting point. The melting point of diamond is, you can see, greater than 3550 degrees centigrade. You can imagine. So covalent bondings are also very strong, very strong. But in some cases, the covalent bonding may be weak, like in case of bismuth. You can see bismuth have weak covalent bonding. The melting point is only 270 degrees centigrade. So this is degree centigrade, 3550 degrees centigrade, and this is 270 degrees centigrade. So you can say covalent bonding also depends upon the type of materials. In certain kind of materials, if covalent bonding is there, that is having high melting point, they have high hardness. But in certain materials, they are weaker, or they are basically having low melting point. Then metallic bonding. Metallic bonding is very important because since we are metallurgists, so we consider metals and alloys much. We mainly deal with metals and alloys, right? So metallic bonding basically forms between metallic atoms. There will be no non-metallic atoms. Basically metallic atoms. Fine. So you understand, in a metals we have positively charged iron core. You can consider that is nucleus, right? And surrounding them we have sea of electrons, right? Or clouds of electrons. The valence electrons are free to move. They can form a clouds, electron clouds or electron sea. They can flow, right? That is not localized electron, right? So it can form bond with any positive ion core, right? So due to this sea of electrons or the cloud of electrons, which are the free electrons, they form a bond between the positively charged kernel or positively charged ionic core present at the center of the atom, right? So there is a strong attractive force will be there because electrons are negatively charged and positively ion core is positively charged, right? So due to the strong attractive Coulombic force, there is a strong bonding in the metals also. So metallic bondings are actually, if you look carefully, there is a range of bond strength. Some metallic bonds are weaker, some metallic bonds are stronger. You can see. And the interesting nature of the metallic bonding is they are non-directional again, because this electron cloud or electron sea are free to move. They can form bond with any atoms, right? So they are non-directional. You can see the strength of bonding is 68 to 850. That is variable, very low and very high also, but not like ionic bonding. They have range of bond strength. I have written. It's like melting point of mercury. You can see minus 39. That means in the mercury, mercury basically exists in the room temperature, right? Exist in the liquid state in the room temperature, right? Why? Because they have very low bond strength. But if you consider tungsten, the tungsten have very high melting point. Tungsten is a metal which have very, very high melting point, 3410 degrees centigrade. You can imagine. Why tungsten have very high melting point? Because of this strong bonding, this metallic bonding. Fine. Now, finally, we'll move to the conclusion: bonding in metals, ceramics, and polymers. Metals, ceramics, and polymers are three important classes of engineering materials, right? So, metals basically have metallic bonding, which is due to strong electrostatic force of attraction between the positive ionic core and the sea of electrons. In the ceramics, we have basically ionic bonding, but it is not always true. We have both kind of bonding, covalent bonding and ionic bonding also in the ceramics. Actually, the nature, you have to remember, the nature of bond in ceramics may be 50% ionic, 50% covalent, or it may be 90% ionic, 10% covalent, right? Like that. But in case of polymers, we have basically covalent bonding because they involve non-metals. Right? Now, question is why polymers and ceramics are mainly thermal and electrical insulator, but metals are good. Metals are good conductors. Metals are good conductors. Of electricity and good thermal conductor, but polymers and ceramics are not, because of free electrons concept only. Because in metallic materials we have sea of electrons or clouds of electrons. These are actually free electrons. They are non-localized. They are not localized to a particular atom. They can freely move in the materials. So they are not, due to the presence of non-localized electron in a metallic materials, right? They are good conductor of heat and electricity. But in case of ceramics, they do not have these free electrons. In polymers, they do not have. So they are poor conductor, or you can say they are insulators. Fine. Then gross plastic deformation happens in which materials? You have to remember the gross plastic deformation happens in metallic materials actually. Again, because of this concept, because of this metallic bonding only. So metallic bonding leads to good thermal and electrical conductivity, and metallic bond also leads to the gross plastic deformation. But in case of ceramics, they are brittle. If you remember, there is no gross plastic deformation will happen if you apply a load. If you apply a huge load on the ceramics, they will break down into pieces. But in case of metal, they will elongate, right? Gross plastic deformation means they will elongate. If you apply load on it, it will not break easily. It will elongate to a large distance, then it may fail finally. Or in other words, you can say metals are ductile. So ductile materials shows gross plastic deformation, and metallic materials are ductile, whether the ceramics materials are not ductile. So here I have written ionic bonded materials, like in case of ceramics, they are brittle. They are brittle. But metallic bonded materials, metals and alloys, they undergo plastic deformation. Gross means to a large extent. Secondary bonding. Secondary bondings are basically van der Waals bonding, which is a weak bonding, which is a physical force. So you have to remember secondary bonding basically are present in inert gases and between molecules in a molecular structure that are covalently bonded. Can you give an example of secondary bonding? Anybody remember? Anybody remember any secondary bonding in materials? How many of you remember hydrogen bonding? Anybody remember hydrogen bonding?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It is present in what? Which kind of material? Can you give an example? Can you give an example of that?
Oxygen, fluorine, and nitrogen with hydrogen.
Best example simply you can give is water, right?
Yes, sir. Water.
Water, H2O, right? Maybe I'll show you the image of water in the next class, if possible.
Yes. Intermolecular hydrogen.
Yes. In water, water always remain in molecular form, H2O form, right? So H2O, one oxygen, two hydrogen, right? H2O. So in between this H2O, there is a strong covalent bond, H2O. But once it become molecule H2O, it will form a bond with another H2O molecule. So this, in between this H2O molecule, there will be a hydrogen bond. And this hydrogen bond is a weak bond actually. But if you consider only H2O molecule, single H2O molecule, in single H2O molecule, we have covalent bond, strong bond, right? Which is a primary bond. But if you consider molecules of water, one molecule of water making bond with another molecule of water, and the molecule of water makes bond with another molecule of water, the bonding is actually a hydrogen bond, which is it is a secondary bond, it is a weak bond. That's why I have written between molecules in molecular structure that are covalently bonded. The best example is water. In inert gases also we have this kind of bonding. So hydrogen bonding is one of the best example of secondary bonding. And dipole-dipole interaction is also there. You understand, one dipole interaction. Okay, so I'll end this topic here. If you have any confusion, you can ask me right here.